I'd like to know what women are already doing around the world.
Well, see, one of the things I'm doing with this book is telling stories, because stories inspire us to think how we could do something similarly. Empowerment begins at the grassroots. You know, it's wonderful what's happening at the other end of the spectrum, but at the grassroots, for example, one of the stories that I think is really applicable is in Uganda. There was a woman who was being badly beaten by her husband, and her neighbors were concerned. And she said, as beaten women often say, "But I deserved it, I provoked it." And they said, "But if you should die, your children will be orphaned, no mother." And so she agreed to do what they suggested. They gave her a whistle. They called it a penny whistle, a little plastic whistle. And she promised that the next time the beating was about to begin, that she would blow the whistle. And she did. And the neighbors came in, and what they did was say to the husband, "Beat me, beat me, beat me instead." And of course that just cut through the whole thing. And then what was called the penny whistle movement went through that village to the next village and really affected domestic violence in Uganda. Well, contemporary women have cell phones. If you're in the equivalent of a village, that is a circle of women who know what's going on in your life, not only do you get suggestions and support, but we have cell phones now. When we had a land phone, you could hardly make an important call in the middle of the living room or wherever the land phone is. But with a cell phone, you could go to your closet, you could go to the bathroom, you could call your circle of friends and ask them to do whatever the plan was. They might show up and do something that would definitely make a difference.
So we can reach out at any time, is what you're saying, whether we have penny whistles or whether we have cell phones. We can take the high-tech approach or the low-tech approach, as long as we remember we still have circles.
As long as we're in circle with other women and are supporting each other to make a difference in our personal life or in the world. A core group of women, especially in a circle with a spiritual center, meaning that they call on the wisdom and compassion that is in all of us, but is in the center of the circle, then it empowers them to not let each other down, to support whatever the cause is, like what was called the Jersey Girls, the 4 9/11 widows, who got the President and Vice President and Condoleezza Rice to testify before the 9/11 Commission, because they really worked together and called each other up, emailed each other. And if you have a support circle behind you, there's a tremendous amount of change.
You can do anything.
Yes.
You can do anything.
Women together can do anything. Gather the women, change the world. Gather the women, save the world.
You've also told some wonderful stories about whistleblowers, about women who've had the courage to stand up for their co-workers. And what you're saying in this book also is that women look out for each other in business, in community.
Well, not always. But if there's a sister archetype, I'm saying that women are the more compassionate gender. That tests show that women are likely to have feeling reactions if they see a child suffering, if they see an animal being beaten, if they hear a news story about some people that are suffering. Women have a feeling reaction. And if we are the gender that have more automatically compassionate reactions.
And that's the response that you're hoping
Yes.
to ratchet up when you get this book into the world.
If we're missing that half of the human race that tends to be more compassionate, more collaborative, more connected, something's wrong with this picture.
You give some examples in your book. You call them antidotes for our current ills, which is a prescription for your readers. Can you tell us what those antidotes are?
Antidotes to patriarchy, which meaning to the use of power over and the effect on children especially, that if women could have a say, as they did in the indigenous communities, imagine having the grandmothers decide the priorities for the people. Imagine if all children were safe. I don't think, I know, that the way the world has been run since the Greeks, the well-being of the vulnerable people, the old, the very young, the powerless, hasn't been very important. Every child who suffers in utero because the mother is terrified. Now we know that the womb is not even safe if the mother is terrified. There's a cortisol that goes across the placental barrier, and so that child will come out hyper, smaller, and from the beginning more likely to be affected by the domestic violence that probably, or the war violence, or the, you know, if the world is not safe for children, then generation after generation we have little boys that grow up to want to control things to be safer, and little girls who get used to being victims. And it's not so impossible to think that if the mothers of the world got together to help children to be wanted and safe, how many generations might it take? Maybe not very many before it's possible to have a peace-oriented culture.
Well, you've got a study guide at the back of this book, too. You are trying to make this an interactive process. Do you want to say a couple words about that?
More than a study guide. It is a discussion guide and a circle experience. In the back of the book, for those groups that do, you know, there are a lot of book groups these days. Well, I want this book to be discussed, to change the women in them, to have them consider what they can do. But I also want them to have an experience with what it's like to be in a circle with a center. And so in a few words, it's pretty easy to do, I've explained how a book group might turn into a circle with a center and have a circle experience as well as a discussion of the issues and questions and personal stirrings. You see, this book is to personally stir up the reader to want to make a difference.
Well, it sounds like this could be another feminine mystique in that it encourages women to use a fuller scale and range of their capabilities than they've been using ever before. And I'm wondering what your vision is, what you would like to see most happen as a result of urgent message from Mother going out to the world.
I would love it if my words are just at that point that something is emerging in the psyches of women, and I'm giving words to it so that there is an aha, this is really what I want to do. See, that was what the feminine mystique did, is it gave words to a dissatisfaction and an unease that was held by individual women. And I think that individual women are feeling that the world is not in a good shape and that we should do something. And a call to be in circle again, to make a difference like the women's movement did. From 1966, the women's movement began, and one of the beginnings of it was that one book. I would love it if this particular book had the same effect, if it could inspire women to get together once again in circles, the older women to give back and to make a difference with all the connections and wisdom they now have, the younger women to share with each other their visions that they want to make this world better. And we could be off and running. We could have a third wave of the women's movement, and we really could bring peace to the world through bringing safety to the world.
Thank you, Jean. That's lovely.
You're welcome. I hope this really goes out there and makes a difference.